Hey there, hunters. Welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Today we're going to look over the patch notes for today, which is May 9th. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. Feel free to check it out in the description below if you want, but I'm just going to highlight some things and talk about, what builds got affected and what's changed. So hopefully short video, but anyway, let's just take a look at these notes. First, Invoker buffs. It should feel a lot better overall. Way of Maedra is pretty lackluster in my opinion, but I also don't play heal builds. Kayula and Lydusa are both improved and should just be nastier. Damn near every build is already incorporating Invoker before, and they're definitely going to continue to do so now. Ritualist got 5% more added damage on his Wrath perk. It's something, I guess. Archon got 5% more mod gen and refund on its power creep, so that's cool. Havoc form got nerfed like I said it would, but barely. It's barely a nerf. Yes, the move speed is slower, but the DPS is still insane. It took like a 10% overall DPS nerf. It's still one of the best builds in the game right now. Also, the blink still hits twice, so that part is still the best, and I was doing double damage over Tickle Fingers before, so yeah, that's even better. Anyway, moving on. Ranged weapons. Thorn's blowback now scales with mod damage, but only the mod part, not the default shooting and blowing up, so that's still just explosive. After some testing, Thorn's still pretty awful. I don't recommend using it. Sure, you can hit for 40k if you want to spend 30 seconds just of your mod just putting needles into the target while you're dealing no damage. But yeah, the overall effective DPS is like 1.4k. It's nothing. Don't be baited by Reddit posts and stuff. It's not a good weapon. Monolith buffs. This weapon is peak meta right now, so of course it deserves more buffs. It just got the elemental tag, but still, come on, like it's fucking insane. Mirage Cyclone has the melee tag now, which, like I mentioned before in the Sandstorm build video, like it allows you to spam Shock or Mutator and other melee mutators now. That's going to get reverted. Maybe not the melee tag, but it's definitely not going to work with mutators because it's just straight up overpowered. Crit builds died for this, by the way. Failsafe Mutator will now proc per charge spent, so like Big Bang can proc a refund off all 5 charges, meaning that it's pretty easy to get 1 or 2 charges back on a shot, so I like that change. That's cool. Jester's Bell got a 5-second duration increase to its proc, so it helps Tickle Fingers a bit. That's cool. Band of the Fanatic got 5% more additive damage and now only reduces dot duration by 50%. We'll talk about dots in a minute. Burden the Follower got 5% mod generation back, so it's back to 30%. Devour Loop got fixed, so it can actually proc active skills, and it works nicely again, so that's cool. And all the Elemental Necks got 5% more additive damage, so they're all at 25%. And Shadow of Misery is now 20% status damage. And that's pretty much all the significant changes as far as I could tell. Okay. Some fixes, some buffs. Havoc form got toned down a tad. But anyway, let's talk about what got affected in the long run. To start, let's go over skill builds. Starting with the obvious Havoc form. It got barely touched. Like really, anyone claiming to be mad about the nerfs didn't use Havoc form post-patch. It's fine. It can still do like 3.5 to 4k DPS. It still shreds bosses. It's fine. They even fixed the bugs so like when you get hit, you don't get knocked out of it. So it's better than before. It's nerfed technically, but it's still amazing. Blink will get it fixed eventually. Don't know when, but it's definitely not staying with those double hits. But yeah, feel free to rock Havoc Fingers, Tickle Fingers, whatever. It's staying for a long time. Invoker buffs in general and all skill builds. While Kayula didn't get directly buffed, now that you can actually safely spam Tidal Wave without resetting the Lightning Storm triggers, you can get way more DPS out of this skill with more spam, which is good for any Invoker build really. Lydusa also is an insanely good skill. Brittle got more crit chance, which is awesome, and the Wisp's explosions, God I can't say that, getting more tags to scale off of is very strong. While I find this skill clunkier to use than the Wave, it's a really strong skill, and it works better for range builds anyways. Plus, Invoker in general could just be sustaining skills for pretty much any other archetype, so Invoker rage builds are definitely a thing. Run Lydusa with that. And pretty much every build involving Invoker is just going to be better at this point, and yeah, so that's crazy. Moving on, Ritualist and dot builds. So Ritualist got 5% more additive damage. That's always welcome, but I doubt anyone's actually going to notice this. We're going to talk about all the dot stuff here anyways, but dots are kind of a lackluster archetype right now. Reason being is that the 2 best damage over time abilities are Nebula's Nanoswarm and Monolith's Sandstorm. Nebula is improperly scaling off dot duration skill, which is the only reason why its dots are large on it, and once that gets fixed, it'll be a sad day. But that's why Nebula is still like the best sidearm. Monolith also isn't technically a dot, but it is an elemental damage over time. But since it doesn't scale off anything with statuses, it still ends up being the strongest freaking dot in the game, which means that there's not much of a reason to use other dots. Like, out of all the mods, Heatwave included, mutators, melee weapons, whatever else, you're never going to out-dot Nebula and Monolith, which is the unfortunate truth. Sandstorm is 225 base DPS. The next best thing is Heatwave at 150. The difference is that in order to get Heatwave even up to just Sandstorm's base levels is going to require you to run about 45% additional damage from like 3 rings or 3 trinkets. But you could also just put that into other elemental damage buffs and buff Monolith anyways. Plus, Monolith can crit since it's not technically a dot, so you can scale it much better with crits. And guess what? Nebula can crit too. Also, Sandstorm is a fire and forget mod, just like Nebula, with a duration like Firestorm, meaning that you can just toss it out for damage, and then if you get enough mod power, you can just shoot it again and have 2 of them stacking, which is obviously double damage. And it just takes advantage of all your extra resources, whereas throwing a dot on an enemy from any source does nothing for you. Dots don't stack. So you have Sandstorm, the strongest base dot in the game. It can crit, it can chase enemies, and it can stack on itself. Why would you pick anything else? It's just the superior dot at this point. So you could go with elemental scaling and pick up something else in your offhand, which is why everyone just wants Nebula, because they both scale with elemental anyways. But these 2 weapons are the new dot build. You can put these 2 with pretty much anything else, and you're going to have your dots. None of the other dots really matter at this point. Now, the jumping jars do have potential since they are in the same boat where you can kind of overlap them. But their dot doesn't stack, and also it just doesn't have the best uptime on bosses that move and stuff because they kind of have to be positioned properly. And it's just not super reliable. Okay, so that kind of covers the dot changes and Ritualist and kind of what I feel about dot builds right now. They're fine, but until we get some base damage increases, dots are going to be playing second fiddle to Sandstorm and Nebula, unless those get nerfed. Anyway, let's move on to the mod changes with Archon, Follower, Kinetic Shield, and general mod builds. So there are good mod builds out there. I'm not saying there's not, but it's all duration-based mods. Sandstorm, Nanoswarm, Firestorm, Heatwave, Loathe the Weak, Ring of Spears, and Emma mods. All those mods are good because they have a lot of uptime because you don't have to constantly be refilling their mod bar. Plus, they can take advantage of the leaking gemstone, which is a hugely powerful ring for these. But direct damage mods just aren't good. My main issue with having direct damage mods, besides their damage just being low, is that they're hard to build around properly, as you have to use every single mod generation item on you to be able to use them on a semi-regular basis. Which isn't all the time, which means you're going to have downtime, and you're not going to be doing any good damage in the downtime, because obviously if you're scaling for a direct damage mod build, your guns aren't going to be any good. So it's in flux right there. That's not good. Now, even if you do scale all the mod generation, you're not left with having anything to scale the damage, which of course we only have a few things to actually scale mod damage these days. And that's why direct damage mods have to go to crit to scale, which also recently got hit. So really what I'm trying to get at is that the mod generation items buffs are cool, but they're not changing what's wrong with direct damage mod builds right now. There's just not enough stats to go around anymore to be able to sustain direct fire mods, or scale their damage, or do both. Mod Swapper isn't going to work anytime soon, and Anguish pretty much just has you covered as the jack of all trades mob spam build. It's super strong and easy to play, and it works. So unless you're beating Anguish, there's not much of a reason to play other mod builds right now. And then pretty much every other build is the same or kind of got better. No significant nerfs this patch. For the most part, it's just buffs, so that's cool. Overall, though, I don't really have any new ideas for other builds since nothing really changed a ton. And until I can make a better mod build than Anguish, there's not much of a reason to go there. And then same for dots competing with Monolith and Nebula. Unless there's a reason to do it, like those two are just going to be better. So it's the rise of skill builds in this DLC, and well, actually Hugs is still amazing with the new Plasma Cutter and Savior. Highly recommend those. I have videos, Bolt's got videos. Hugs is still really good. Melee is also just slapping cheeks. It survived. I mean, it's gotten even better technically because the Brawler ring got buffed. Tank build survived for now. The other thing I want to talk about is Devour Loop, since that got fixed so it can trigger active skills again. So before, I was using it for mainly 2 skills. Havoc Form, which doesn't need it anymore because you can get 2 stacks of Havoc Form with Invoker Primary, which you want to use anyways because it's skill and elemental damage. It's the best pair for it. And no boss is living through 2 uses of Havoc Form, so that's just that. So Havoc Form doesn't need it anymore. The other thing I was using it for was sustaining Bullet Storm. Well, for the most part, I mean, a lot of automatic weapons aren't doing too good these days with all the crit nerfs. You can still run dev loop for like plasma cutter and do like kind of the same thing we did before with dev loop, plasma cutter, crit stacking, hugs, you know, that still works. That's still really good. But I can't really see anything else to actually build around, because you can't really do a lot of crit stacking, and there's not very many skills that you need to upkeep. So I don't know. I mean, it's cool. I'm glad they got it fixed, but I thought I'd use it more, to be honest, and I'm just not. So I don't know. So I'm not just really using Devour Loop right now either. But anyway, yeah, I don't have any other ideas. Everything's still going pretty strong for the most part, except mod and dot builds. Yeah, that's pretty much going to be all for me. So thank you all for watching. Thanks for listening. I see you all in DLC 3 or next major update or something. But yeah, peace and good luck out there, hunters.